Greetings from Paris, from the Decade Coordination Unit. I'm Julian Barbier, Head of Marine Policy and Decade Coordinator, and I will be moderating this session. I hope you can all hear me well. If maybe people from my team can just give me a nod, just to be sure that all is well. We have a couple of hours planned ahead of us, which is a substantial amount of time if we can get through our agenda as you know, as with the time we have. Certainly, we would like to have time for answers and questions and interactive dialogue. Let me remind you that we would kindly ask you to mute yourself and also mute or turn off your cameras if you are not speaking. You can certainly use the Q&A for sharing information. We would like to also have an interactive session. So I would really invite you to take the floor and intervene. So to do that, you will be able to raise the hand at the bottom of a screen on the Zoom bar. I'm sure you are all familiar with this. If not, please also use the chat to raise any technical issues you may have. The session will be recorded and the video will be made available on the oceandecade.org website, the new website, which we are going to talk about today as well as part of our agenda. And of course, the summary and the presentations that you're going to see today will also be posted on the website. Just a quick overview of the agenda ahead of us. In a minute, I will give the floor to our IUC Executive Secretary for his welcome remark. Then we are going to focus on the status of the establishment of national decade committees and regional task forces, and then we'll hear from our colleague Julie Rigaud from the CU, as well as a case from the Southern Ocean, which is a relatively recent task group, which is also working on the decade. So we'll hear on their ideas and priorities for the decade. We are also going to talk about the call for Decade Actions No.02, and that's coming up right at the end of the week, and very important time in the year for us, for the whole community. And my colleague Alison Clausen will give us an overview of what's going to happen in the next few weeks and months. Then we would like to also highlight again both national and regional processes as mechanisms to incubate decade actions. So we will hear from the US with the National Decade Committee there, but also initiatives going on through the IUC regional subsidiary body, particularly in the Western Pacific region, and from our colleague Wang Shizu, who is leading the organization of a kickoff conference in that region. And then finally, we are happy to take questions, to share experiences. This is what this is all about. So certainly we have at least half an hour scheduled to do that, and then we'll wrap up and close the meeting. So without further ado, let me then invite Dr. Vladimir Ryabinin, IUC Executive Secretary, for a few welcoming words. Over to you, Vladimir.
Thank you very much, Julian, and good time of the day to everyone. I see online 42 people, and you know, most of them are very well known. Some of them are smiling. I hope there will be more smiling soon. So, you know, basically, now we started a very big exercise with the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And when I say we, I mean all of us. You know, it's just really a huge development in ocean science. This is about us achieving noble and important tasks together. And because of that, don't take this meeting as a webinar. So it has to be really, I would say, in a formal exchange in which we all participate on equal footing. And indeed, we started the decade, as was said by United Nations, within structures and resources. That means zero money and zero additional kind of, you know, infrastructure. But in principle, things are going okay. And we, I think, from ground zero already built like a skyscraper, because we have more than 30 different programs led by different organizations. In some of them, there are really hundreds of participants. I'm not speaking about people, even organizations. So this is really an, I would say, unprecedented level of engagement in ocean sciences. And all of that started from scratch, and that is really important to realize. So our goal is to save the ocean, basically, to use it wisely and to create all the elements that are needed for that. And we are starting from scratch. So we have now more than 30 programs that decided to do this and that. And because of that, the landscape of all these activities is quite complicated. Some of these activities are moving forward, and for some of these activities, we understand there is probably not enough or not equal momentum or not equal engagement. So we would like to have a program that will be composed of scope of work that will be composed of programs, projects under the programs, and of course some global organization, but manifestation on local, regional, local, because oceanography is very much a regional science. So with that, we need to ensure that there are mechanisms of co-design, mechanisms of co-creating knowledge, coordinating mechanisms, and of course, engagement of nations is critically important. This is where you come in. The current situation, we have 23 national decade committees already established. 14 committees are in the process of being established. It's also not very even. For example, I think Africa is lagging behind. And there will be a conference in Africa from 13th to the 15th of December in Egypt, in Alexandria. So we will use this as an opportunity to engage the continent there. In terms of regional work, we have different setups, and we have regional, we call it task forces. There are some mechanisms. So they are basically started. I'm very happy about this with South Pacific, in the Pacific, with the South Pacific, with Pacific community. And also, this is already an approved program. The same with the Mediterranean, a recently approved program. So we are moving forward on several other regions. I would like to mention Arctic. I would like to mention also West Tropical Atlantic. Africa somehow is moving forward, West Pac and Southern Ocean. So we are going to hear something from them. So we would like to see that national decade committees and also regional task forces, and also the Decade Forum interacting, enriching each other, that co-design. So this meeting is conducted, today is the 13th of October. So the day after tomorrow, there will be the second call for Decade Actions. And this is really important that, that this is there will be an explanation how this is going to move forward. But basically, it is incredibly important that you take stock of what is happening, take advantage of the second call for actions, engage everyone that you under your kind of scope of work and under your network, and then we will just have another input of great ideas, and we will move forward with the decade towards our noble goals, societal outcomes, working on challenges. So IOC Secretariat is there, and this is our job to assist you in this process. I would like to quote that there are special operational guidelines for establishment and operational activities of the National Decade Committees. So they're available on the Decade website that is being updated. It will be much more friendly website, much more useful. And so please count on us, and also go to the website, read those things, and go forward armed with better knowledge. So thanks very much for being with us. Good luck. I will stay with you as long as I can. And back to you, Julian. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Vladimir. So as mentioned, this week is a very important week for the whole team here in Paris, but also for the communities. The launch of the endorsement of 84 projects, the launch of a second call, the new website, the global stakeholder. So it's all coming in hopefully the perfect I wouldn't say storm, but nice weather, because in the end, I think it's really about providing support and services to the entire community. And of course, the national scale of the Decade architecture is an essential and critical element for which the whole architecture relies on. But it's also very important that as we build this architecture, we really understand the entry points, how the national level can connect and support the regional working groups and entities, how the national level can also connect to the programs, because we are now seeing, as we've heard, a number of endorsed programs that are getting momentum. And it's important to find entry points and ways for nations to contribute to those programs. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Julie Rigaud, who is going to give us a bit of an overview of where we are with the establishment of national decade committees, as well as regional task forces, and remind us a little bit on the process for establishing those. So Julie, if you could please start your presentation. Thank you.
Well, I hope you can hear me.
If the sound is not great, so maybe you might need to get your microphone a bit closer.
Okay, thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I will provide a brief overview of the progress made in establishing national decade committees, as well as regional task forces that have emerged, and their recent activities. So since our webinar last May, 23 national decade committees have been established and are formally recognized as a stakeholder engagement network. And they have formally designated a contact person, a focal point. You can't see the list on the screen. They are highlighted in blue. There are relatively small groups of stakeholders, around 20 members. And these recognized national decade committees are now focusing on increasing the sectoral and gender balance of this group. And we have recently shared an Excel spreadsheet to invite you to identify the ECOPs that are members of your national decade committees, and offered some help to identify ECOPs network in your region. 14 countries are also in the process of establishing new national decade committees. They are in white on the screen. And as mentioned by Vladimir, we have developed operational guidelines for the establishment and operational activities of these committees, which are available on the Ocean Decade website, and I will have the link in the chat after my presentation. These guidelines provide soft guidance on the establishment process, membership and representation, the mandate of these committees and their possible activities, and also the use of the Ocean Decade logo and the annual monitoring and reporting process. The request for registration should be sent for this new National Decade Committee via the Ocean Decade email address, oceandecade@unesco.org, by the national IOC focal point, and that's important. And once registered, the National Decade Committee will become a member of the Global Stakeholder Forum that is operational and will have the opportunity to use the Decade logo. But I would like to remember that the National Decade Committees have to request the use of the Decade logo for their activities by filling out a form, and I will also share the link in the chat a little bit later. So what are the role and possible activities of the National Decade Committees, and what kind of activities are they undertaking so far? National Decade Committees can and are supporting and contributing to the coordination at national level of the co-design and co-delivery of decade actions by facilitating the planning and implementation of national priorities through the development of national action plan. For example, Brazil and Japan have developed such national action plan, or by facilitating the co-design of initiatives between members in advance of calls for action to identify ideas. And Larry Mayer will explain later how this works in the US. They also have carried out national level outreach and communication activities by organizing kickoff events. Japan, Canada, Colombia, Sweden, US organized such events earlier this year, or by organizing informal webinars showcasing successful activities of their members to inspire actions in others. They have developed Decade website using the Decade logo. And finally, and we will discuss this a little bit later, but we can see that as a next step, we would like to also encourage them to mobilize resources and contributions to support the design and implementation of the already endorsed Decade actions, and also to engage with other national Decade committees. And they will have the possibility to interact, to collaborate, to exchange ideas with other national Decade committees on the global stakeholder online platform, and to facilitate their exchanges. In addition to these national platforms and building on the outcomes of the regional consultation workshop, 3 regional task forces or planning groups have emerged in several ocean basins, and higher sea regional entities are also playing the critical role in supporting regional stakeholder engagement in the Decade. For example, by organizing kickoff conferences. And my colleague Wenji from Westpac will explain later how they are supporting the co-design of Decade actions. Many of these groups and task forces are working towards the development of regional Decade programs. For example, the Mediterranean Sea and the Pacific have submitted programs in response to the first call for Decade actions, and these programs have been endorsed. Or they are working towards regional action plans. That's the case for the Western Tropical Atlantic Planning Group, as well as the Southern Ocean Task Force. And Annemie Jensen, who is here with us today, will tell us more about the Southern Ocean process. And I forgot to mention that the Arctic Task Force already published an Arctic Action Plan, which is available on their website. So I will stop here and give the floor to Annemie so she can provide further information about the Southern Ocean process. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie. So let's hear from Annemie Jensen, who's the science officer at the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences, and who is one of the leader of the Southern Ocean group that is focusing on the Decade. So over to you, Annemie, for a quick overview of what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Julian, for the kind introduction. So yes, I'm Annemie Jensen, and I coordinate the Southern Ocean Task Force, which is, as you said earlier in the webinar, quite a new task force, as we only received endorsement over the summer. So as you can see from the members, from the logos on this slide, we are quite a large group of people involved in this process. And we did this after the first regional workshop. Could you change the slide, please? So if you look at the process so far, if you look at the upper left corner, we had the first Southern Ocean Regional Workshop in February 2020. That was the first step before even gathering a task force together. And there we had a first attempt at identifying priorities for the different outcomes. And the biggest outcome of there was actually designing the task force to develop the action plan. And we've been working on that since then. although we had a little bit of a problem with COVID. So it took a little while, but beginning of 2021, the task force collated all the priorities that we could identify or that have already been identified through the implementation plans of each of our members of the task force. But also we looked at previous initiatives such as the SCAR Horizon Scan. We also looked at the COMNAP roadmap and the EU PolarNet. That was also a big initiative in 2016. And so from that desk study, it actually formed a basis for the review of identified priorities that was published in May, where we tried to classify all these priorities per outcome of the Ocean Decade. And so what we did then was opened up the process, because all of these steps before was quite closed within the task force. And so in May, we launched a survey where we gathered some input from anyone who wanted to give some, whether they were early career or senior scientists, but also policy and NGOs and industry stakeholders. So we received quite a lot of input in May, and over the summer, we set up working groups for each of the societal outcomes, so dedicated to all of these. And then that's where we had quite a rise in engagement. So we've had, I think, over 160 people getting involved in our working group meetings. And we actually had the second Southern Ocean regional workshop 3 weeks ago. That was quite successful. We had about 450 registered participants, and that was the opportunity to have a look at the progress we made so far for each working group, because each working group had to develop a report of what they had identified that was needed for the Southern Ocean. And so we had a joint consultation of all the reports. And one thing that really stuck out was that we had a lot of cross-cutting themes between the different objectives. And so now what we are doing, we are at the very bottom of that circle, and we are reviewing and finalizing the action plan, meaning that we are actually having a look at the reports, taking into account all the comments we've received, and the process is still open to anyone. So we have representatives. If you want to join, you can still join simply on our website via the Take Action button, because the process is still open, even though that we are already in the final stages of developing the action plan. But we're currently merging all of these and looking at cross-cutting themes. And that's where we are at now, so as you can see in the red little square. Next slide, please. So yes, as you can see there, those are the 7 working groups that were set up. And after the workshop 3 weeks ago, we established an 8th one that really is starting work now. And we already have 6 cross-cutting themes identified. And those are the really overarching ones that came back in each of the working groups. But we notice as well, and it's quite difficult to tackle, cross-cutting themes that only cut across several themes and not all of them. So we're working at understanding how we exactly going to represent that in the action plan. And then for the next steps, we are, as I said, looking at the cross-cutting themes now, and post-workshop, the objective that we are aiming for, and hopefully we'll make it, we hope to publish the final action plan on the 1st of December, which is Antarctica Day. So that is our deadline for our next deadline. But if you wish to join, please still do, because you can still join the process. Thank you. Next slide. I think that's the end. Yes. Great.
Thank you very much, Annemie, and congratulations for really advancing quite well on the development of this action plan. And the message, I think, to all our members, and is that the process is still ongoing. So if you would like to contribute, please do so. I also, just for Julie, we also pleased to join the new Finnish National Decade Committee, so that I think we can update our figures there and add one more established committees. I would invite our colleagues from Finland and to inform the Secretariat of the official contact point, so we can have this information also presented on the Decade website, where we will have a dedicated space for national Decade committees. So I just want to maybe take a pause now, and before we go to the next item, which is the call for Decade actions, and really open the floor for any questions or comments that colleagues may have. I see there is in the chat a question maybe to Annemie, is related to whether CAMLAR is actually involved in the process of developing this action plan. So maybe Annemie, you could respond to that one, and also happy to take any other questions if you just want to raise your hand, and I'll give you the floor.
I was just typing my reply, but orally it's easy. Yes, we do have CAMLAR involved. So we have several representatives from CAMLAR. The ones I can think of off the top of my head, we have the representative from France, from Belgium as well, who are mostly involved in the working group 3 for the sustainable production of the ocean. So yeah, CAMLAR is involved in the process. We also have the Antarctic Treaty System involved. But we noticed now that the engagement is really just kicking off now. The working groups took a little while to start, but it really kicked off just before the workshop, and the workshop has made even more people join the process. So we're getting a lot more requests from organizations to join the process as well. But to answer your question, yes, CAMLAR is involved in the process.
Great, thank you.
Julian, if I may,
sure.
Because the thing is that there are many people around the world here. So, just for those who are not so familiar with the Southern Ocean. So CAMLAR, Commission for Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources. Right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the clarification. It's true that we do tend to use a lot of acronyms in our community, and this is good to always clarify what's behind those letters. Okay, any other questions or comments on maybe national Decade committees, the process, any new information to bring to this group? If not, we'll then go to the next presentation, and this is my colleague Alison Clausen, who is going to present to you the upcoming second call for Decade actions and engagement processes for the Decade through a global stakeholder forum. So Alison, over to you.
Great, thanks, Julian, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Maybe we can go straight to the first slide, Julie. Thank you. So before jumping into the call for Decade actions, the second one, which is something I would like to spend a bit of time talking about, I just wanted to give you a recap on where we're up to with the results of the first call for Decade actions that closed earlier this year. It's been a while since we've spoken to this group, and there have been some new announcements and movements coming out of that first call for Decade action. So we thought it was worthwhile doing a recap of that. From the 230 odd submissions that we received to that first call, we now have fully endorsed 31 programs, 10 UN-led Decade actions, 36 contributions, which are the in-kind or financial resources, and 84 projects. So you can see that in that we've got about 161 Decade actions that have been endorsed out of that first call for Decade actions. The full list can be found on the website, and we're gradually getting individual summaries of all these Decade actions up there, so you can learn more about them. The programs are already there, and the projects and contributions are coming. As I think some of you will have seen who have sort of already been delving into some of the Decade actions that are endorsed, there's really, really high diversity both geographically, but also thematically in terms of the actions that are already there as part of this first batch. So they range from observations to work on multiple ocean stresses with a focus on acidification, deoxygenation, a number of programs and projects around deep sea and mesopelagic management and research, coastal resilience, fisheries, and then a lot of work around cultural values, ocean literacy, and behavior change. We have 2 major regional programs that have already been endorsed, and as we've heard, there are others in the pipeline, but regional programs for the Pacific and the Mediterranean have already been endorsed. And then we have what we're calling in some of our internal jargon anyway, network programs, which are really a range of sort of cross-cutting programs that work across all the different themes and all the different geographies, and are looking at things like best practices for ocean science, early career ocean professionals, gender, capacity development, or programs that are going to help with certain tools or approaches that are needed during the decade, such as co-design and co-creation. Or looking at links to innovation and technology. So you can see we're starting to have, or we already have, a very, very strong group of programs, of projects, of contributions that are, you know, really those first foundational building blocks of the decade. And if we can move to the next slide, please. One of the things that we've been doing with these first set of actions, and which we will continue, we've started with the programs, but we'll move down to the project level as well, is starting to look at the resource needs of endorsed programs. And this, I guess, links to something that Julie's mentioned, and I'll also come back to, which is, you know, the focus now as we went through the preparation phase, we're now in the action phase, getting the different decade actions endorsed and up and running, and we need to really be also focusing on the resource mobilization aspects of the decade, given that many of these decade actions that are coming in obviously don't have their full funding yet secured. So we've had a first exercise of what we're calling a resource needs assessment, which is basically sending out a worksheet to all of the endorsed programs to collect information on their first 3 years of implementation, which is looking at coordination costs. It's looking at the action costs of the program itself, and then it's starting to get an idea for, as projects are developed to populate these different programs, what might the costs of those projects be? Now, that has proved quite challenging, and I think we've still got some work to do with the programs to fully define that. But we are starting to get I guess an overview or an idea, even at a very high level, of what the secured resources are for some of the endorsed programs and where the gaps still remain. And I think, you know, one of the headline numbers that came out of this, which we find very reassuring, which we've presented to the Interim Decade Advisory Board, and which they also find very reassuring, I think, is that nearly a quarter of the total resource needs for the programs for the next 3 years are already secured. So it means we already have, you know, very tangible resources, either financial or in kind, to get these programs up and running, and to, you know, that we can use to leverage additional resources and funding. The two, or the table here and the graph here, just break things down a little more to sort of look at some of the absolute figures in terms of the needs, what is already secured, and what is the gap. I think it's worth mentioning, because you'll see some really big numbers in that gap line about what the total gap is for those programs. Most of that $2.7 billion is concentrated in a very, very small number of programs. And that is because we have a real, I guess, diversity in the maturity of programs. Some of them have a very, very clear idea of what the projects are that they want to put in place, or that they want to solicit over the next 10 years, and exactly how much that is going to cost. And so there's a very high level of detail in those project costs, which you can see in that figure, the $2.2 billion gap in project costs. Whereas other programs still don't, you know, they're still working on strategies, they're still working on the more detailed implementation plans. So I think that figure on gap in project costs is something that we need to continue to work on, continue to refine, and we need to really note that imbalance between the different programs. One thing that's really interesting here, I think, is in the coordination cost. So coordination costs in absolute terms, the overall need is close to 40 million, but nearly 40% of that is already secured. And I think that's also another very important and good news story that we can be talking to donors about, saying that, you know, a lot of these programs already have a vast majority of their coordination costs secured, which again can then be leveraged to the action costs and the project costs. So this is an exercise that is going to be repeated every 6 months. It will be refined. This is again a first snapshot. We will be getting to the project level as well, and we'll be really working with the programs and the projects to build this out and then to transform it into products that can be used with funders, that can be used with resource providers to give them information on where additional resources are needed. And this is obviously one of the roles that we see the National Decade Committees playing, and also the regional task forces. So if we can move into the next slide, because it leads into this discussion, we wanted to put together, and it, you know, builds on what Julie was saying as well, but we wanted to put together some bullet points on, again, before we look at the next call for Decade Actions, what are some of the very concrete things that you as National Decade Committees or regional task forces can be doing to support this group of 161 already endorsed actions. And I think it's important to say that we will be sending you in coming weeks, we're just putting it together, lists of endorsed decade actions, so programs, projects and contributions for each country and each region. And these will be sent to the National Decade Committees and the regional task forces. It's a work in progress, because the last 84 endorsement letters, I think the last ones were sent on Monday. So we're still getting the database tidied up and ready to share with you, but you will be getting that. And then some of the things that you can do once you have those lists is really to try and, you know, convene these actors. So setting up workshops or discussions between the proponents of these decade actions at the national or regional level, so people have a clear vision of what is happening at the country level or at the regional level, and start to be looking for synergies in the way that they can be working together. Certainly making links between the endorsed decade actions and ongoing or future national and regional processes, events or initiatives. And again, this is a lot about communication and being sort of that glue between those endorsed actions. And then advocating with national and regional funders. And this is where we will be able to provide much more detailed, much more tailored information on resource needs at the national level, at the regional level, at the thematic level. We'll be sending around a circular letter to member states hopefully in the next week or so, which contains a much more detailed breakdown of what I just showed you. And then we'll be asking you to let us know what information you need to be able to talk to national and regional funders, so that we can also get them enthused and aware of and engaged in the decade processes. You're obviously working and talking to these funders, to these resource providers at a level that we are not. We're focusing, you know, we're obviously doing a similar thing at the global level, but certainly your help in making those national or regional connections to funders and providing them with the information that they may need is going to be critical to mobilizing resources for endorsed decade actions. Other areas of support are communications on decade actions at the national regional level, and then again synergies helping to find new partners, for example, as programs are looking to solicit projects, which leads me into the next slide, if we can please, Julie, which is about the next call for decade actions. So this is call for decade actions #2 2021. As Julian mentioned, it will be released on Friday. So it's a very busy week for us here, trying to get all the documentation and the survey links. As we run through it, you will see it is quite a complicated setup that we've managed to create this time. So we're trying to be very precise and make sure that things are as clear as possible for people who want to get involved. The scope of this call was discussed at the most recent interim Decade Advisory Board meeting, and was actually the subject of quite some intense discussion and debate about how best to have a call for decade actions, which is both open and making room for anybody who wants to be part of the decade, but also helping to construct and fill gaps that we can see exist within the existing set of decade actions. So trying to balance those two issues led to, as I said, a lot of debate and discussion. We hope we've come up with something that will achieve both those objectives. The timing of the call is, as I said, the 15th of October, generally until the 31st of January, but I've put 2 asterisks there because there are some specific deadlines for different pieces of the call, and I'll come to that in the next slide. It is a call that is made up of four or five different elements. So I'll go through these now, and then there's another slide which shows this in a slightly more graphic way, which maybe make things a little bit more clearer. But the first element, if you like, of the next call for decade actions is at the programmatic level. And so we have a focus of this next call on thematic or regional programs that address 3 of the 10 Ocean Decade challenges. And these are challenge 1, focusing on marine pollution, challenge 2, focusing on multiple stresses on ocean ecosystems, and challenge 5, which is the ocean climate nexus. Now, these 3 priorities were chosen because of the gaps that are emerging through, the results of that first call, where we see either we don't have major global programs addressing these issues, or alternatively, we have a whole bunch of projects but no sort of framing program which can coordinate and bring these projects together. We also looked at ongoing global processes, so obviously COP26, CBD COP15, and tried to see where some of the key priorities are going to be in the next few years in terms of knowledge needs. And that led to this primary focus on programs addressing challenges 1, 2, or 5. However, we do not want to restrict the call only to programs that focus on those challenges. And so we've put in place a second level of what we're calling an expression of interest, which is a shorter, a much simpler form to fill out if you have a program idea for that addresses primarily one of the other challenges. Then you can fill out this form, get in touch with us. It will be discussed with the Interim Decade Advisory Board, and we will come back to you and let you know whether it is appropriate to submit this time round or whether it would be more appropriate to wait for a future call for decade actions, given that these will come out every 6 months. A future call for decade actions that may be more focused around the particular challenge that you're looking at. And we want to do this because we really want to focus as much as possible, as I said, that effort in filling these gaps, in building these synergies, in being able to spend time with proponents to create the linkages we feel that are needed to achieve the decade vision, but leaving open the possibility for other challenges to be addressed. And in 6 months' time, in April 2022, when we do this all again, it will be another set of challenges, and so on and so forth throughout the decade. So that's the program level. Then we come to the project level, because this call will also be soliciting projects. So of the endorsed programs from the first call for decade actions, 23 of those have indicated that they're ready to solicit projects. And so through this call for decade actions that opens on Friday, there will be a call for projects for 23 of the already endorsed programs. And they're a very, very diverse range of programs. You will see them in the call documentation. And each of those programs has provided guidance on the thematic or geographic priorities for their particular program. We then have 2 really, I think, interesting and exciting other ways that projects can come into this call. And these are actually parts of the call that have funding attached to them for the first time, because as you know, usually the call is not a funding call. But we have worked with very, very key partners, the AXA Research Fund, AXA being a French-based major insurance company, and the Mir Wissen Initiative, which is a German government initiative, to develop what we're calling sponsored calls for decade actions. And this means that if you're applying for a project under the sponsored call for decade actions that has been developed with the AXA Research Fund, or with the Mia-Wisson initiative, there is a possibility that your decade action, as well as being part of the decade, will also be funded. Now, these calls have specific priorities. They have slightly different processes and they have slightly different deadlines. And I'll come to the deadlines because that's going to be very important, obviously. The AXA Research Fund call is very much focused on resilience of coastal livelihoods, and the Mia-Wisson initiative is focused on nature-based solutions for climate adaptation and mitigation in Africa. So they're two extremely relevant and priority themes for the decade, but they are quite specific in terms of the projects they're looking for, or we're looking for. So we do encourage you to really dive into the documentation and look at things very carefully. We then have also through the call some specific support mechanisms. We have some new human resources in the team, so some specific technical support mechanisms for lead partners of potential actions in least developed countries or small island developing states and in Africa. And this is really important to, to bring that geographic diversity to the decade actions. There will be information and online Q&A sessions on the 20th and the 21st of October, one in a time zone that is more, I guess, comfortable for Asia Pacific, and one in a time zone that is more comfortable for US and North and Southern America. I should be able to put the links for those into the chat. If not, you will see those on the website. If we can move to the next slide. I know that was a lot of information, and so hopefully this next graphic sums it up a little bit better. And as we said, we will of course be sharing these slides with you. But this is our what we hope is a fairly simple mind map of how to navigate the next call for decade actions. So you can see, what are you submitting? If you are submitting a program focused on challenge 1, 2, or 5, there is a link, there is a deadline of the 31st of January. If you are submitting a program that is not focused on challenge 1, 2, or 5, but another challenge, then you need to go through an expression of interest process. You will be told in early December if you are pre-approved to submit, and then you will be able to submit by that 31st of January deadline. If you are submitting a project for one of the endorsed decade programs, you go straight through and you submit by the 31st of January. If you are submitting a project to the AXA Research Fund, there is a deadline of the 8th of November. It's a two-stage process, so you need to look very carefully at the requirements, but there is a much shorter deadline. And similarly for Mia-Wisson, there is also a shorter deadline of the 31st of December. So really worth taking some time to navigate the documentation that will be on the website, come to the information sessions and really understand this, because in addition to you yourselves looking at what you may want to be submitting as, as partners within the committees and so on, we're really hoping you can play this role of sharing information nationally and regionally. One thing to note is that applicants must be registered members of the Global Stakeholder Forum before they can submit a request for endorsement, and we'll come to the Global Stakeholder Forum in a minute. If we can move to the next slide. Sorry, I did say I only had 10 slides and it was going to go quickly, but I understand there's a lot of information to share, so I will keep it as brief as possible, but trying to get across key points. Just a very quick reminder of decision-making processes for endorsement. This is a question we get asked a lot. The programs, the decision-making on endorsement is by the IOC Executive Secretary based on advice from the Decade Advisory Board. The projects that are not to the AXA Research Fund and not to Mia-Wisson are also decided by the IOC Executive Secretary, but based on advice from the programs, because obviously they need to have a say and advice and review the projects that are coming in, as well as technical advice from the Decade Coordination Unit. For the AXA and Mia-Wisson projects, each of those has its own specific evaluation process, which the Decade Coordination Unit is very strongly involved in, and then the IOC Executive Secretary retains the final decision on endorsement as Decade Actions, and for contributions, again, it is the IOC Executive Secretary. If we can move to the next slide, some ideas for the role that you as national decade committees or regional groups could play during the upcoming call for decade actions. So the first one, as I said, communicating very widely on the call for Decade Actions. There'll be web releases, social media, a whole range of things going out as of Friday. This will all be on the Trello board. Hopefully you all have access to the Trello board. If not, I will put the link back in the chat. But the Trello board, as a reminder, are basically the evergreen communications assets that we encourage you to use as you're communicating, or to adapt to your local audience. And of course, we want to get the word out as widely as possible on the call for Decade Actions, its priorities, and as much as possible, some of those mechanisms and more operational points of views. Providing advice to proponents on alignment with national and regional priorities. Again, this is really, really important to make sure that what we're seeing is relevant to your needs at the national or regional level. Making connections between partners at the regional or national level. And then if you want to look across regions and amongst national decade committees, we can also obviously help this process, both directly and through the Global Stakeholder Forum. Providing technical or financial support to co-design processes and facilitating, and then facilitating submission of what comes out of those processes to the endorsement for endorsement requests through the call for Decade Actions. And I think Larry Meyer is going to give us an example from the US of how they've been doing this. Developing, as I said, developing your own regional or national initiatives and requesting endorsement. Again, mobilizing national or regional resource providers to make contributions to the next call for Decade Actions, either to support actions or coordination costs, and then letting us know as well what support needs or what information needs there are in your country or in your regional group. We try to be as responsive as possible to providing additional information, to getting on calls, to providing support where we can, but you need to let us know what is going to be the most useful and the most needed for you. I think we will go to the next slide, which was actually just also a reminder. I just wanted to bring this in before we finished off with the Global Stakeholder Forum, which was just a reminder that when we talked about the decision-making processes for endorsement, I mentioned the Decade Advisory Board. Up until now, we have had an interim Decade Advisory Board, which has been functioning. And this is a reminder, many of you will be aware, but there is a process to establish the definitive, if we can call it that, Decade Advisory Board, which will comprise up to 15 expert members. There was a call for nominations that was open until the 22nd of September. We received over 260 nominations, and we're currently in the process of analysing those. There is a selection committee, which is made up of the IOC chair and the IOC officers, which is meeting for the first time next week. And then we'll meet again over the next couple of months, but we're looking to have announcements of the Decade Advisory Board made in November or December, with the first meeting of the board to be held either before the end of the year or early in the new year. So that's more just an update on that process. And if we can come to I think the last slide, and then I will finish, the new Decade website. So a couple of mentions of this already. It's something we're all in the team very proud of and have been waiting for a long time. For those of you who have engaged with the old Ocean Decade website, you will know that its functionality was struggling. I think it was definitely something that was developed for the preparation phase, served its purpose well, but which was struggling through the implementation phase. So we have done a complete redesign and revamp of the Ocean Decade website, which you can now find at that same oceandecade.org link. It is still in soft launch. It only came live yesterday around midday, I believe. So there are still some kinks and things being worked out, which is why you have not seen anything on social media yet. There certainly will be later on this week, but we're still, doing the final live ironing out of bugs. But regardless, jump on, have a look around. We feel we hope it is something that is much more interactive, that has certainly been designed to help you find information on actions, events, resources in a much more intuitive way than the old site. We hope you like it. Do let us know if you have problems or are not finding things, but fingers crossed, it really makes everyone's life a lot easier. And what is at the heart of this Ocean Decade website is the new Global Stakeholder Forum. So this is really the major online community platform for the Ocean Decade. We have been calling it the LinkedIn of the decade. It's really a way for both individuals and groups to be part of a stakeholder ecosystem. It is something that you need to sign up for. Again, it was soft launched yesterday, still working out some kinks. May take a little bit longer than usual to get activated, etc. But please be patient with us over the next few weeks as we work that out. But please do sign up as soon as possible so you can see the full functionality. It is going to you will already see in there in the Global Stakeholder Forum that each National Decade Committee has its own dedicated space. That is your private space. We will be contacting you to ask who would like to be the moderator of that space so that you can manage members, manage discussions, manage the forum, use that space how you want to. There will also be a space for all the National Decade Committees to come together as a bigger group. And again, we'll be seeing if there are volunteers to moderate that or if we do that. But these are really digital spaces that you should use as you see fit to collaborate, exchange, and fulfill many of those roles that we just talked about in the previous slides. For the regional task forces, we have not yet created those spaces, but we are very happy to do so if it would be useful for you. We haven't done it because we know many of you already have your own mechanisms and ways of communicating in place. But again, if you would like space on the Global Stakeholder Forum, let us know and we can do that very quickly. There are also similar digital spaces for the different communities of practice, which bring together the proponents of Decade Actions and other groups, such as the Early Career Ocean Professionals, the Philanthropic Foundations group that we work with, etc. This is going to be the main portal, not only to exchange, to collaborate, to post opportunities, to post resources. Has some really neat functionality about if you are traveling to an event, you can tag that and then you can see everybody else on the Global Stakeholder Forum who is at that event as well to facilitate in-person meetups. But it is also the main portal to submit or to request endorsement of Decade activities, which is something we do a lot of, and to submit Decade Action. So again, you need to be signed up to this before you can really get into that process of submitting. And as I said, it really facilitates sharing of information on events, news, resources, Decade Actions. There are new filtering functions, there are new search functions. We will be getting some maps and other, we'll be building on to the forum that is there over time as resources become availability, and would love also suggestions from you about things that you would like to see, because there's already a lot of modularity built into the package we have. And then, as I said, we can build out new pieces to it as resources become available. So please let us know if there are things you would like to see either on the website, but particularly on the Global Stakeholder Forum. And I think that is it. I know there is one more slide, but it really, maybe we can have a quick look, but I think it summarizes a lot of what I said, just some key dates there. Just perhaps one to note is that we are actively planning for regional and global events, including COP26 in Glasgow, where we will have a number of decade-related events. We'd love to hear from you if you're going to be there. We will have a small team there in person, and we'd be very, very happy to meet up or invite you to events that we're having. So please do let us know. And then we're obviously thinking ahead to next year as well with our Ocean Conference in Palau, also COP15 for the CBD, and the big 2022 UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon. So lots to keep us all busy. I'm sorry for the information overload, but I hope it was useful. And of course, happy to answer any questions, and I'll put a range of links in the chat.
Great, thank you, Alison. Indeed, quite a lot of information for all the participants today to digest. Let me also recall that particularly for national focal points, we do have a circular letter that will go out very shortly, and that in a sense will be recapping a lot of what Alison has presented. Before we go to our next presenters, maybe let's again take a pause now and see if there are any comments or specific questions on what has been presented this afternoon. So let's open the floor if anybody would like to raise a question, make a comment. please feel free. Okay, I don't see any comments. Yes, we have our colleague from Spain who would like to take the floor. So this is Mr. González Quiros. Over to you, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks, Alison, for the clear presentation, and thanks, Julian, for letting me speak out. Within the Spanish committee right now, we're trying to make a recapture of all the initiatives that are already ongoing in Spain that can be aligned to the decade objectives. But however, I don't know how to sort of organize all the initiatives that are already ongoing in order to be able to be a contribution for the decade. In the sense, I mean, we have a national plan of research that already is financing research projects that are aligned with the decade, but to what extent something like that could be considered a contribution? From the list of contributions that I have been approved, I don't have a very clear idea of what is could be declared as a contribution to the decade. This is a bit puzzling for me, at least.
Thank you, Rafael, for this question. So, I mean, clearly in the vocabulary of the decade, contributions are what nations, governments, philanthropic organizations, private sector may put as to support particularly the decade actions and coordination. I think clearly, you know, we're in a very different situation than from 6 months ago, where we did not have yet any endorsed programs and projects. So this was relatively broad, and we did register, I think, over 36 national contributions that came forward. Now, I think as we are starting to see the emergence of a much clearer picture of what are those specific needs, and again, building on the resource assessments that Alison mentioned, and the specific gaps that projects and programs are identifying, I think it would be very good to try to link those national contributions to those specific gaps that have been identified. So hopefully the Alison mentioned that you know, we will be sending out this kind of detailed analysis of those gaps, projects by projects and programs by programs, and those hopefully will be able, I think, to guide you in tagging you know, some of your national programs and research infrastructure that could contribute to those initiatives. So hopefully, I don't know if that answered the question, but I think that vision will be much clearer once you receive this information through the circular letter that's going to be sent out probably by next week.
Okay, thank you.
Alison or Vladimir, would you like to add anything? I see Vladimir, do you want to react to this in particular, and then I'll move on to the next.
Yeah, you know, thank you very much, Julian. You know, I indeed would like to hear from Alison what she would like to respond to that question. But you know, Rafael, you know, I would like to say that the work that is happening here in IOC on reading these multiple submissions, learning what is happening, trying to map this is very big. No, I wouldn't be able to do it. I don't know how the Decade Coordination Unit is doing that, but to some extent, the same work may be required at the level of national planning. So you create the map, you see what is going around you, what is going in the areas that are important for you. You see how this matches, then you accelerate what is necessary, then you identify gaps, and this is what should be also international. So that's the principle. Just basically involves quite serious difficult work and planning. And that is exactly the beauty of the decade, that it requires us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. Alison, would you like to add anything before I move on?
Yeah, just perhaps quickly, because I just wanted to take the example of some other national contributions we've got in. That there's, as you mentioned, Julian, there's certainly that scope to look at the pipeline of endorsed programs and projects that is already there and see where the contributions align. There is also the possibility to look, to look forward and say, what are some of the upcoming priorities of the decade, and look at this idea of having sponsored or co-branded calls for decade actions with governments. And this is something that we've started looking at with Canada, and I think there are a couple of other member states that we'd like to, who have put in national contributions for their research programs, that we'd like to look at this, this similar model with, but designing together calls for projects that would be financed through national research programs, but that are contributing directly as decade action. So I think that's another model that we could potentially look at as well, and happy to have a follow-up discussion on that to understand better where, how things are structured in Spain with the research program and what the opportunities may be.
Great, thank you. Let me then give the floor to Kirsti Faderstad from Norway. Over to you, Kirsti.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, and thank you, Alison. I have a very specific question about this global stakeholder forum. As far as I understood, and I have not been to and looked for it at the new website. I look forward to do that. But as I understand, we have to sign up, you say, and that is for everyone, whatever you have done before. But is it on like the national committee, or is it on a personal basis for every one of us that want to be a part of this? Thank you.
Alison.
It is on an individual basis. Unfortunately, as well, we could, because we're using two such different software packages, we couldn't automatically transfer people who had signed up to the last website to this website, although we will be doing mail outs and trying to encourage them to, make that process as easy as possible. But people do need to sign up individually. So you will need to get the members of your committee to sign up individually. And then there will be a moderator of the National Decade Committee group, which will be one of you, who will then let in the people in the National Decade Committee into that sort of private or restricted group of the National Decade Committee. But we will be we're working with our comms team to put together more instructions on this, and we will be sending those out. And I should mention, we will have a full-time community manager that we're in the process of recruiting, who will be providing tech and administrative support to moderators of groups, committees, and individuals around the Global Stakeholder Forum.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go over to Professor Michida from Japan. Over to you, Yutaka.
Thank you very much, Julian, and thank you for the clear presentation by Alison. I have learned a lot about the progress made during the last couple of months. And I have a short question regarding the proposals that failed to be endorsed for the first call. My understanding is the Decade Advisory Board has made the constructive suggestion to those proponents who failed to be endorsed. That is very important, the process in terms of the inclusive way of the implementation of the decade. So we have to go all together in an inclusive way as much as possible. So in this sense, I have a question regarding what took care of the proposals that failed to be endorsed. This is the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So let me reassure you, Professor Michida, the word failure is not part of our language in the decade. So certainly okay. we do have a process that is, when an initiative that has been put forward, either at the program or project level, has not quite yet met the Decade criteria for endorsement, we try to guide and help the proponents to get to that level. So this is why we've come up with this terminology of pipeline, and that is to basically park those initiatives that are in need of support and improvement, so that they can eventually get the endorsement. So this is also part of our role as a Decade coordination unit to really help and guide those proponents and connecting them wherever with the expertise that is existing, or with other, for example, endorsed Decade actions that could also support them to reach the endorsement.
Thank you. It's very good. It's great. It is very important action for the wider engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me go to Mr. Mohammad Poor from Iran. Over to you.
Good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thank you very much, Ms. Clausen, for your perfect presentation. Just on slide 8 or 9, I was just wondering if we could add the the governing board of UNESCO Category 2 Regional Education and Research Center on Oceanography for West Asia. I thought it was it could be added to that slide as a regional center for education and research center, and as part of the Ocean Decade program. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Yes, indeed, the Category 2 Center is an important resource that could actually support the Decade. Clearly, this center was established even before the Decade existed, so I think it would be good to maybe engage with you to discuss how we can frame the support of the center to support, especially in the IOC-India region, the development of Decade action. So we'd be happy to discuss with you, sir, in a parallel process.
Thank you.
Okay. I see no other hands raised, so I guess our next presentation is to dive into the national level once again, and we've invited Larry Mayer, who's the head of a US National Decade Committee, to tell us a little bit how those national Decade committees can help fostering co-design of Decade actions. And in particular, there's a very interesting process there of incubation and providing support to get those great ideas to emerge and to become Decade actions. So Larry, good to see you. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Julian, and it's very nice to be here. And I want to thank you and Alison and Julie for the earlier presentations. Each time it helps clarify where we're going. It's a complicated process, but we get there step by step. The U.S. established a national committee more than a year ago. Sometimes I have to say it seems like a lifetime ago, but that committee is hosted by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And it's important to note that while the committee is funded by the U.S. government, it's independent of the government and probably much different than other national committees. We don't have federal representatives sitting on our committee, and that's because of the nature of the national academies. Our hope and our focus initially was really to establish communication channels for potential U.S. participants in the decade. We wanted to encourage participation from U.S. universities, research organizations, the breadth of entities that might be involved, federal, state agencies, NGOs, industry, and so on, and connect all these activities and connect those group of activities to the UN Decade itself. And we do this mostly through our website. You'll see that website address, I think, in the last slide probably, but it's been a very active website. Next slide, please. In doing that, we created something we called a series of nexus organizations. These are organizations that express a direct interest in participating. We probably have 50 or 60 of those, again, communicating through the website. But we also very actively involved early career scientists. We have 4 ECOP members sitting on our next committee. And we also have an amazingly active youth advisory council, which brings folks 14 to 25 years old into the mix, and they have a tremendous amount of energy and have been very, very active. But most importantly, I think coming back to Julian's comment, we wanted to inspire the community to think boldly and take advantage of the global awareness and momentum that the decade brings to push the limits and imagine what ocean science in support of sustainable development could look like over the next decade and beyond. And to do this, we introduced the concept of ocean shots. Next slide, please. We defined ocean shots as ambitious transformational research concepts that could draw inspiration and expertise from multiple disciplines and fundamentally advance science for sustainable development. We set out a series of criteria for those ocean shots, which included addressing the challenges presented in the decade implementation plan, demonstrating their transformative impact, engaging a broad base of scientific and other sectors outside traditional ocean sciences, building capacity, and engaging the next generation. And our hope was to foster the creation of programs of such broad-reaching scale and relevance that they would capture the imagination of the science community, of funders, the public, and policymakers, much like the moonshot of the 1960s. The response was really tremendous. We had more than 100 submissions through, we've had 2 calls so far. It's going to be an ongoing process. And these have provided a real wealth of new ideas for initiating US efforts to the decade. And you can see these on the US Decade website. We have them documented in a number of ways. It's important to emphasize that this process is independent of the UN Decade call for actions, the formal endorsement process. The Ocean Shots initiatives will need to go through the formal endorsement process via the calls for decade actions launched by the DCU before officially becoming part of the decade. But they do kind of fit in this concept of co-development. I'll come back to that in a minute. Next slide, please. Well, based on the strength of those submissions, the federal government has now just recently asked the U.S. National Committee to identify several cross-cutting themes. And the criteria for those cross-cutting themes is that they have to incorporate the promising and innovative research concepts that emerged from the ocean shots, and they have to align with the UN endorsed programs, with the implementation plan, and with established US ocean science priorities. And these have been documented in a number of US documents. So while this is a US initiative, it's fully in line with the goals and the objectives of the UN Decade. And I think very much fits this concept of co-development that Vladimir and others have been talking about. And we're working on creating these themes right now, and we hope that they'll be out for public comment by early November. Next slide, please. So our instructions from the government was that, and here's the quote, the themes identified by the committee will address compelling areas for public and private sector investment and provide opportunities for inter and multidisciplinary activities in support of ocean science. So the bottom line here is that what we'll be doing is presenting these concepts to the federal agencies with the hope that they will establish formal funding mechanisms for some or all of them. And I think this is where we tie into the resource assessment spreadsheet that Allison showed. Next slide, please. So with this concept, with respect to this concept of co-development, these are US initiatives. There's no question about that. But with respect to the UN Decade actions, by definition, each theme that we're going to develop will be aligned with the goals of the UN Decade and will have the potential to fit into an existing UN Decade program or other action, or have the potential for generating new programs or actions. And here's where the National Committee can work with the PIs and work with the DCU to help submit them through the call for decade actions and then have them become officially endorsed as decade actions. And I think and I hope that this is very much in alignment with the process that Allison outlined. And let me end there and just put on the last slide, which I think has the Decade website. If there are questions, or at least there's an email address there, you can find out much more about what we're doing. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Larry. Another, I think, great example on how national decade committees can really foster this concept of co-design. Continuing on that theme, we're going to go to the regional level, and we are going to ask our colleague Weng-Shi Zhu to give us a bit of an update on how this is being addressed at the regional level, and in particular through the regional kickoff conference process that is going to take place towards the end of November, and when she's going to tell us a little bit how this incubation is happening. So over to you, Weng-Shi. Good to see you.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. Yes, I think the UN Decade of Action is upon us. So with many support from our countries in the region, I think the regional kickoff conference for the Western Pacific and also general areas will take place, I think, on 25-26 November, hosted by the government of Thailand and organized by the IOC subcommission, of course, in partnership with a number of our partners from different countries in the region. Next, please. So I think as this is very, I think, easily understood by all of us. I think the kickoff conference is to mark the launch of the UN Decade in the region and also represent the beginning of the region-wide efforts in the development and also implementation of action deadline. The most important things is to catalyze partnership and initiate the co-designing process in order to result in transformative solutions among different stakeholders in the region. The last objective is to test the mechanism, I mean the enabling mechanism for generating the transformative ocean solution in the region. Next, please. So next, please, Julie. So the 2 days conference will be composed of actually two key components. One is a high-level segment and also stakeholder roundtable dialogue. And the second is a series of interactive side events entitled Decade Action Incubators. Next, please. So with the understanding that we need to think globally and act locally to make peace with the nature, to deliver a prosperous, the ocean for all, and leaving no one behind. So the high-level segment actually provide platform for all high-ranking leaders from national agencies and also UN agencies to express their support for the UN Decade, but more importantly, to put forward their perspective for furthering ocean science development and cooperation to assist all in achieving the sustainable development of ocean. Next, please. The ocean and ocean science hold answer to many challenges, I think, plaguing humanities. So the roundtable dialogue, stakeholder dialogue, aims to generate transformative ocean science through the engagement of the different stakeholders to share their lessons, good practice, expectations on, and also joint actions and also collaborative partnership for the UN Decade over the next 10 years. Next, please. So this is something I would like to highlight, the UN Decade Action Incubator. This is one, I think, the enabling mechanism we put into place as one key component of the regional kickoff conference that will serve as an interactive forum, to catalyze partnerships, to strengthen dialogue from the knowledge generator, mainly from the academia and research community, to knowledge users. So we also, based on this idea, proposed from the regional groups, we also come up with some basic criteria for selection of the UN Decade Action Incubator for this region, because this is a call, it's an open call for all stakeholders individually and also institutionally and also country in the region. So the incubator must be aligned with the vision and also our UN Decade challenges, and also aims to generate transformative ocean science in comparison to what has been done in the past, and also to promote the multidisciplinary solution-oriented approach and also engage broad stakeholders, and also give a consideration to gender balance and the geographic representation, in the conduct of these incubators. Next, please. So we just closed the call for the UN Decade Action Incubator last Friday. And we received more than 20 proposal incubator from different stakeholders. Now we are still in the process to review and also to integrate and also to further improve the quality of all proposals. So based on what we have been done so far, I think around 14 to 16 incubator will be officially established at this regional conference. I think those incubator, as I listed here, will cover a very broad range of regional priorities and also with the close connection to their global challenges. For instance, the most important biodiversity and ecosystem health, including coral reef health, marine mammal, and sea turtles, and also will cover the solution to our multi-stressors from human activities such as plastic pollution, harmful algal bloom. And some incubator will look at the largest circulation system in this region. The second, the crucial study, and also its adjacent regions, and also the marginal sea issues to understand their change in the global climate change. And some incubator will focus on technology development, including the seamless ocean forecasting system to deliver better service for predict the ocean, for oil spill emergency response, and also development of a coastal inundation and erosion monitoring and the system to reduce the disaster risk and the coastal development. Next, please. And some incubator will focus on previous, please. Julie, the last one. We'll focus on marine spatial planning and also promotion of the integrated multidisciplinary research and monitoring in a demonstration site, selected demonstration site with a social, economic, and economic importance. And also 2 incubators will also serve as a platform, connection between their endorsed global program and also the possible regional actions. Like the Goose Coastal Predict and also Marine Life 2030. Last but not least, I think the Early Korea Ocean Professional Asia Network will also have an incubator to focus on how they can contribute to improving the science and knowledge communication for the region. I think this is a very great improvement or achievement for the Early Korea Ocean Professional in the region. They're not only focusing on the capacity development issue, but also consider how they can further contribute to the ocean science development and the cooperation in the region. So last but not least, so the incubator, I think a mechanism and the stakeholder, the mechanism will serve conducted in a more sustainable way and are essential mechanism for the future enabling our activities in order to, leverage or to stimulate and also to further strengthen the development of their co-designing approach of transformative solutions among different stakeholders in the region. So that's why I say in the future, we also have a 10-year plan to organize the regional ocean science or ocean decade conference with their incubator and also regional stakeholder dialogue as 2 key mechanisms, in this kind of a regular conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wangxi, and great to see the progress in the Westpac region and very innovative way to create those incubators and to keep those going, because clearly, getting them started is one thing, but you really need to get the discussion going and the collaboration established over long term. So this is very good. Before we open up the floor, I just want maybe to give a chance to our colleague Mika Odido to say a little bit what is happening with regards to the kickoff conference there for Africa, which is supposed to take place sometimes in the mid-December. And there is also this concept of co-design, of course, which is embedded in everything we do. But maybe if I can just ask Mika to go over very briefly on the process there so that we get a full picture. Mika, can you do that?
Thank you very much, Julian, for giving me this opportunity to share what we are doing in the region. The kickoff conference, as was mentioned by both Julian and Vladimir, will be held from 13th to 15th of December, online with a limited physical presence in Alexandria, Egypt. We are thinking of about 100 participants in Alexandria. The conference will focus on presenting the current status of scientific knowledge of the marine and coastal ecosystem and services, including pressures, threats, and priority issues, identify the gaps that need to be addressed, synergize in partnerships and collaboration around the Decade vision and mission across countries and various stakeholder groups, and providing a forum for supporters of the Decade to announce commitment to the Decade, including flagship regional Decade actions. Building up to the conference, we planned a series of initiatives that will contribute to the discussions during the conference. The week before the conference, we'll have a pre-conference workshop from 6th to 8th of December, which will be online, where the common regional priorities will be identified for presentation at the regional conference. Feeding into this pre-conference workshop, we have two parallel processes that we are currently undertaking. One is working together with the Western Indian Ocean Marine Science Association. We are working on a regional gap analysis, looking at what's the current status of scientific knowledge, what are the gaps, what are the priority issues that need to be addressed, and the actions that can be taken to address them. This builds on the regional consultations that we had ahead of the launch of the Decade. In parallel to this, we are also undertaking a survey of national strategies and priorities for the Decade. Basically, it's a questionnaire survey that is currently ongoing, and we hope to complete by the end of this month. We are also working with the early career scientist networks in the region to develop a regional Ocean Decade booklet, which will be in three parts. The first part will basically look at what is the UN Decade of Ocean Science and what does it aim to achieve, what is at stake in Africa and why should people care, or what would a successful Ocean Decade in Africa look like. And then the second part, we look at the different Decade challenges from the African perspective. What are the anticipated actions? What are the gaps? Maybe case studies demonstrating how challenges can be addressed, looking at what initiatives can be celebrated that have been successful in the region. And then we'll finalize that with a final chapter, which will basically be a call to action. How do we trigger action and bring on board stakeholders? How do people get involved? Giving relevant examples of Decade programs that have already been endorsed, and describing the co-design process. So these are some of the things that we are looking at as we build up towards the kickoff conference at the end of December. Thank you. Yeah, the middle of December.
Great, thank you very much, Mika, for this update. And finally, maybe just to give you a bit of a global perspective, I just wanted to also highlight that we have the Ocean Decade Laboratories, which is also a place for testing some of those ideas, co-designing, creating collaboration amongst different stakeholders. This is organized through the German Ministry of Research and Education together with IOC. And following the launching event on the 1st of June, we've already had 2 Decade laboratories that have been organized, one in July and one that took place in September, addressing the Decade outcomes. Number 7, which was Inspiring Ocean and Engaging Ocean, and decade outcome related to predicted ocean. So we have more coming up. Next month in November, there will be one on the clean ocean. And again, those are organized around 2 days events with a core event of about 3 hours, and then a number of satellite events where partners, projects can come forward and basically present their ideas and create this collaboration. So keep this in mind. There's a dedicated website for this, which is oceandecadeconference.org, I believe. But again, we can maybe put in the chat the correct URL if it is not the case. Okay, so I think we are in the last leg of our meeting. Time for answering any questions, comments. I see we have a hand raised from our colleague Leila Neves, so I'll give the floor straight ahead to her. Leila, over to you.
Thank you, Julian. Good morning, everyone from Cabo Verde. Here we are participating also, and we will have the Ocean Week on November, which many of you will participate, we hope. I'm glad to see Mika Odido, the colleague here from Africa. And so we would like to connect to them as we are not yet connected. And we see that there is this African initiative. So we would like to take part and also connect in our continent as we see that maybe we need to work more together. And thank you for the opportunity. And we would like to share, as much of you know, we did participate on the second laboratory with a side event, a hackathon with the Western Africa region, and a program that it is endorsed as a project for the Ocean Decade here in Cape Verde at the Ocean Science Center. And we are glad to say that in November, we will host the Ocean Week and have a side event also. Thank you. We will share further information so much more can participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leila, for this information, and certainly I'm sure Mika will reach out to you to get you involved in the Decade Kickoff Conference for Africa. Anybody else would like to take the floor, ask a question or share information? If you have information you would like to share with the group, please do so. Okay, well then I think that takes us probably to the end of our event today. Again, I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to the new developments of a decade. As it's been mentioned, a lot of things are happening and have been happening in the last few months. Certainly, the Global Stakeholder Forum will be a very important mechanism for engaging both national level entities, but also the regional level. So we really invite you to register within that group. I see there's one hand there raised. So this is our colleague from Iran, Mr. Mohammed Pour. Would you like to take the floor, sir?
Oh, just a few seconds, if I may.
Sure.
I would like to thank Dr. Riabinin and the whole IOC members for endorsing our plan, our work plan for 2021 to 2022, and actually our project called the West Asia Blue Waters. Well, this program covers a wide range of different oceanographic disciplines that are organized in 5 different projects with the aim of environmental preservation, education, data and information sharing, and associating coastal dwellers in ocean and coastal observations. Well, I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you for sharing this information. This is well noted. So I think if there are no other comments, then in closing, once again, invite you, as I was saying, to join the Global Stakeholder Forum, to engage in those regional working groups and events that are shaping up in different regions. We will soon be also, probably at the beginning of next year, launching a process to identify the venue and the interest of member states to host the next global Decade conference, either in 2023 or 2024. This is still far away from now, but we need to kick off that process early on. And this will also be a kind of an important moment in the life of a Decade, 2 or 3 years into its implementation, to really take stock of the progress and identify where priorities needs to be addressed and so on. So with this, I think on behalf of the team, we want to thank you all. I would like to maybe invite the colleagues from the Decade Coordination Unit to turn on their cameras, because we have, as it's been mentioned earlier on, we have some new colleagues who have joined. In particular, we have Chelsea Koch, we have Claudette Spiteri, who was also helping with the regional activities. We have Chloe Nunn with us, who's been with us for quite some times now, but it's been very instrumental with the endorsement of actions. So I just wanted to maybe you see the team which is growing and hopefully is helping you and serving the community in providing important information and helping with achieving the Decade goals at all levels. With this, Vladimir, would you like to say anything in closing?
I just would like to thank you and this wonderful team that is now visible to everyone. And I think, I think there is one important thing that was several important things, but one just really resonated with me. Indeed, there may be an impression that from more than 200 different ideas of the Decade that we received, we kind of selected 30 or a little bit more, and then the rest is abandoned. No, in the Decade, this is impossible. And indeed, it is always feeding future ideas. So I think let's just work in that spirit. So no one is left behind, and just good luck. We all need it, and the ocean as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. And of course, we will continue this dialogue with national Decade committees and regional groups on a regular basis. So we will certainly schedule probably another a webinar before the end of the year or in early January. With this, from Paris, we wish you a good day or a good evening, and we look forward to see your contributions and your inputs, particularly with regards to the second call of Decade Actions. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Have a good evening.